Do starter homes really cost $1 million? This week on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. Hey everyone, this is Chris.
And this is
Welcome,
Dan. I cut you
welcome,
off.
welcome to the Extreme Personal Finance Show, episode 24. Do starter homes really cost $1 million? And joining me, Dan.
What's going on,
Dan,
Chris?
was your starter home $1 million?
No, it was not. Holy cow, no. And I know I don't have much hair, and neither do you. And we're starting to look a little older, but my first home was not that long ago either. So it's not even something where it's like, oh yeah, it wasn't $1 million back in 1972. It's like, no, 2017. So
That'd be an interesting thing to talk about too, because I bought my first home. I was 20. So
wow, all
I
right.
moved, yeah, I moved out of my dad's house. So my dad said I can stay there as long as I want, but he just said, hey, when you turn 21, I'm going to charge you rent. And I'm like, cool, seemed fair, totally understood, right? And I had friends that were renting apartments, and this was 1992, 1993, 94, around
Mhm.
that time. And rent was around $600 for like an average, like, one bedroom apartment here just outside the Twin Cities. And here's the thing. I bought my first home and my principal, insurance, taxes all in was $319 a month.
Wow,
I know.
that's something.
So it is.
Now, that being said, so I have to ask you this though. Um, without doing a calculator or whatever, 92, 93, somewhere in there, how much was $300 though? Was that, it was more than what we feel like it is now though, right? It was,
Sure, sure.
yeah,
Yep. No, that's fair. Yep.
yeah. So I'm not saying it probably still wasn't a smaller amount of money than today, but not quite the same as it. Well, I guess so. I got my first job in 95. I think my wage was $4 an hour.
Yep.
So,
Sure. I bought the house. I was making 750. So I made
okay.
750 an hour. Yep. And I was like my first job out of college. Um, yeah, in
All
the
right.
printing industry. So
Yeah.
that's what
So
that was.
750 an hour, 300 something dollars. That's a lot. That's a lot of your money going out every
It,
month.
it is. It is.
But
Um, yeah. So if you do basically the first house over in the east side of St. Paul, it
okay.
was like $52,000 was our house. And it was hard to find one that didn't have, I mean, that were just disgusting because I was
Sure.
looking at things I could afford. Anyway, I looked at ones with like dirt basements, and yeah, it was some basements you were just afraid to go into, like little holes, and
Right. Don't open that door. It's
that's
just
right.
we don't go there.
That's right. Dude, I went in one and it was like a Franken house. It was like every room was like on a different level, and it was just like
So
so like,
funny.
what is happening? Anyway,
Okay, I have to ask you
yeah,
this. You reminded me of something. Have you ever been to New Orleans and looked at any or gone on Zillow and looked at any real estate down in New Orleans?
I haven't. No.
So they had what were called, they still have what were called shotgun houses. Um,
Hmm.
I'm told they called it this, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, but what I'm told is because you could open the front door and shoot a shotgun and it would go out the back door. It's just a straight
Really?
hallway all the way through. And it is. You walk in, you're in the living room, and then the next room is a bedroom, and then the next room is a kitchen, and then the next room is a bedroom. You can't get from one to the other without walking straight through them. That's just how they were made.
Wow.
Um, but you go through them now, some of them anyway. Um, I went through some back in 2010, somewhere around there, a little bit before that. Um, and wow, just because of the way that they were built, and then people tried to do some DIY renovations,
Sure.
you would see some very strange floor plans. It's like, okay, there's a bathtub here in the middle of the room up on this raised pedestal for why? Who knows? It
Right.
was just so bizarre.
That's crazy. And again, maybe one of these times we'll get into some episodes about real estate investing and stuff like that. And I've seen some crazy things looking at rental properties, buying from other investors. And I bought
Mhm.
one and it was so crazy. Believe it or not, they had the refrigerator was plugged in. So the refrigerator had like a hole drilled in the floor. The power from the fridge went through a hole in the floor, plugged into a power strip, and the power
Oh no.
strip was plugged into where like the washer and dryer were plugged into. It was so bad, dude. Like,
Wow.
I mean,
All
how
right.
does that it yeah. Anyway,
Well,
it makes me laugh. I'm crying a little bit because I'm laughing so hard. Dude, so I want to get back to the
yay.
episode. So this episode is we're basically, you know, a couple weeks ago there was like kind of flooded the internet with some headlines talking about there's all these cities where starter homes, and again we want to really dig into, well, what actually do they mean by starter home?
Sure.
Costs you $1 million in a bunch of cities, and this is from a Zillow report that came out, and it talks about over 200 and some cities where the home can cost at least $1 million. And this is due to a couple different things. It's basically because of a housing shortage and some building regulations that prevent newer homes from being built, that those like first time or starter homes can be purchased. And again, a lot of these fall into kind of some major markets like California, New York, New Jersey, and that type of thing. But I'm really curious to talk to you about this. First, let's talk about what they mean by starter home.
Sure. So I don't know about you, but when I hear starter home, I tend to think maybe a house that's not very large, maybe just a two bedroom, one bath. It's either or a single bedroom, so it's for one person or a young couple. They don't need a whole lot of bedrooms. One bathroom is okay, and a kitchen and a living room, right? So that's what I think when I hear starter homes. I don't know, are you in the same boat? Is that kind of where your mind
Absolutely.
goes when you hear starter homes?
Yep.
So, and of course, I don't know if this is how you found it or not, but you see the headline, you click on the headline, it takes you an article, and then that article talks about a study, and then you click on that link, and it's another article about the study, and you just have to keep digging down until you find
Right.
the actual analysis, right? So after digging down that rabbit hole, you find on the actual Zillow analysis says the typical starter home defined and for this analysis as being among those in the lowest third of home values in a given region. So they take all the home values that are in a given region, split it up into thirds, and then the value, and it doesn't go into a definition here, but so I'm assuming the average value of that bottom third,
Right. Right.
which which it seems like a very weird way to make this analysis, right? Especially with the way averages work. I
Yeah.
don't know if you ever in your head you ever see the word average and go, "Was like, well, what about the median?"
Hmm.
I don't know. Is it just me?
Yeah.
But because averages can be skewed by those
Totally.
outliers, right?
Totally.
It's like, well, okay, you got two houses. One is $0 and the other is $2 million. Well, the average is $1 million, right?
Right. So well, that you raise a valid point, right? So if you think about the regions that where this was, like Sacramento, California, um, you know,
Like San
in
Francisco, New
oh
York
yeah, I mean,
City,
you
Metro,
know that those homes are upward. I mean, they're well over multiple, millions of dollars. So
right? And so then when you get to that bottom third is still going to have some very expensive homes, right? And so it's gonna pull the average up, just because that's how averages work. You get those outliers, and so then that way, obviously, a house that's two bedroom, one bath that costs $600,000 compared to where we live is still a lot of money for a home. So not trying to diminish that by any means. However, when you have homes that on the low end are say between 400, 600, it you don't need too many that are 2 million, 3 million in order to
right,
pull that average up. pretty fast because you're not
Right.
comparing it, averaging in with $50,000 homes like you were talking about in
Yeah,
St. Paul, right?
that's right.
So everything's skewing up anyway. There could still be plenty of volume of homes that are down for those areas. It sounds weird to say it, but more reasonable at $500,000. Um, but that's just how averages work.
I do want to talk a little bit about, okay, let's say you are, you know, you just got your first job out of college, and you're in these areas, these high cost of living areas. You're in these cities that are kind of called out in this article. There's like basically like 117 or so cities that they call out where these starter homes are so expensive. Well, I do. You and I kind of talked about this before we started recording. There may be an opportunity for you to go somewhere else. I I think we need to be realistic, and if you're unable to get into your first home, and again, maybe it's not right away. Maybe you do wait until your 30s.
Right. Well, that's a good point because I think unfortunately and very unfairly, um, and I say this from speaking with young people in my full-time job, work with a good amount of people that are aged 17 to 24, right? Who feel like that they should be set in their career and have a home and have everything figured out in their mid 20s. And I
Is
don't,
that what you find? Seriously?
yes, absolutely.
Interesting.
When I talk, there's like, oh yeah, I was trying to get my first job. I don't know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. It's like rest of your life. You're in your 20s, your early 20s at that. It's like, what are we talking about rest of your life? Or they think that their first job is what they're going to be doing for the rest of their life. It's like, no, even if you are one of those people who happen to be fortunate to find a company where you just fit and you love it there and it's a great organization, um, you apply yourself a little bit, you will not be doing the same job
Right.
20 years from then. You'll you'll move up, you'll get raised, you'll get promotion, the company will grow, a new arm of the company will open up and you'll be the perfect fit for it. I mean, any number of things will happen over the course of your career where wherever you are on day one is not where you're going to be on day one of, you know, 15 years later, right? And it's very easy to not recognize that because when you're starting off, you're so focused on the present today. This is this is where I'm at. I mean, it's hard to forecast out 10 to 15 years, considering the fact like when you're 25, 15 years, that's almost all of your life.
Yeah.
It's like you don't have a 15 years of adulthood to look back on and be like, oh, I have all this
Right.
experience now. So, I mean, you're just doing the best you can with basically the data you've accumulated so far. And it's from your youth. You just don't have that experience to look back on yet.
Yeah. I'm actually I'm actually kind of surprised. Again, you deal with that demographic a lot more than I do. And I just would have thought more young, I guess younger people would opt to rent for a longer time than feel as though they need to buy a home quickly.
Well, I think some of them are opting to rent, but they're opting to rent because they feel like they won't ever be able to buy,
Sure.
and it's just like they're supposed to be doing it now, and that's what they're seeing. People who are my age, like, oh, well, you have a house and these other people have, it's like, yeah, but they're further along
Hmm.
in their story than you are.
Right.
You're still on chapter 10. We've read ahead and now we're on chapter 30. It's
Right.
our story is
Right.
further along now. So they are renting, and it's not, I don't know, it's that they're choosing to rent, it's that they think they have to rent, and that having to rent is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just this is just where you are right now.
Right.
It's like, well, I can't afford a house. It's like, okay, well, that's okay. Don't get
Right.
down on yourself. Keep applying yourself, keep looking for opportunity, keep networking, keep sharpening your skill set, and where you'll be 5 years from now, 7 years from now is going to be in a different position than you're in today. And future you will likely, as long as, like I said, you're
Hmm.
putting in that time and that effort and that focus, future you is going to have a much better shot at
Right.
being able to do that.
Right. And I do want to also just let people know too that the Zillow article did call out that a typical entry level home in the US does come in at about 200 grand. And again, that varies depending on where you are. I know you could get some starter home, entry level like townhomes, like in my area for like
Mhm.
180. Once I saw some the other day, like 173, right? So, I mean, definitely a lot more achievable than $1 million.
Absolutely, absolutely. And another thing I found interesting too is, it's the way that they phrase articles, 200, more than 200 cities. But again, you dive into the data and you have to see more than the headline, right? If
Yes.
you just see the headline, that's one thing, but you dive into the actually read the article, it's like, oh, well, most of them were in the San Francisco area, the Los Angeles area, New York City metro area,
Right.
so the article says 200 cities and it sounds like, oh, well, that's, all of the cities in the United States. It feels like it at first. The U.S. is a huge place, and if you were to add up all the cities, it's ginormous. But when they say it that way, and it was, I think, six metro areas, a couple in California, New York, one or two down in Texas, and then Seattle, I think, was another one. But those metro areas made up almost 2/3 of those 200 cities.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's like it, it it's not entirely as bad as it looks. Now, that's not to say that if you are in one of those, early career jobs in one of those locations, that maybe it's a little bit tougher. Certainly not trying to discount the
Oh,
situation
totally.
that people live in
Yep.
in those areas. But there's a lot of people who don't live in those areas who will just assume that it applies to them without then digging deeper into the data, realizing, oh, I actually can afford a house, or based on my current trajectory, maybe in 3 or 4 years I'll be able to afford a house.
Right.
You know, so it's easy to just get down
Oh,
when you see the
oh,
data like that and
so
just feel
discouraging.
defeated.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so discouraging. They're like, well, I'm never gonna afford a house ever, right? It's like, well, maybe that's not where you live. Maybe that's not, and there are other ways that you can afford a house, right? There are different types of lending options, where, you might be listening to the Dave Ramsey methodology where, hey, I need at least 20% down.
right.
And there are ways that you can purchase a home without 20% down.
Absolutely.
Um,
There's uh, as low as 3.5% to 5%, conventional, just run of the mill mortgages. There's some that are, oh, what was it? It's USDA, I think.
yeah,
So you hear it and it's like it sounds like, oh, it's living someplace very rural, but from what I've read, there are some places that are really only 30 minutes outside of, a major metropolitan area that are
yep.
classified as rural. So it's not as far out as you think. And then a lot of times with those loans, even zero down. So
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say typically those require no down payment, right?
yeah,
So, um, yeah, I think that another one too is also VA loans, right? So members of the National Guard and Reserves, you can get those. Typically, there's no down payment there as well.
that's
So,
correct. A little bit more of a little bit more of a time commitment on those.
mhm.
Um, I know with the National Guard is after you've done your first 6 year contract. So, but a lot of people that tend to join the military do so at around 17, 18, 19. So 6 years is when you're in your mid 20s anyway. So you don't need to be worried about buying a house when you're 17. And so it can work out really well. VA loan's a solid program.
So looking back at this Zillow article, they talked about how in the year 2023, like 1.4 million homes were constructed, but it's still not enough keeping up with demand. So what I'm hearing there, Dan, is that there's opportunity for you and I to start building a bunch of entry level homes Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it does make you wonder, you
Hmm.
know, I haven't seen any specific articles about this or analysis, but just based off of my eyeball analysis, right, from
Yep.
driving around where I live, it feels like um, those starter homes aren't being built, and I don't. It's like, is it because they're not being built because that's not what people want, or are they not being, what is the cause
Right.
there? So I think it's hard to know, but I think I think there's opportunity for someone to decide, hey, I just want to start building some starter homes, and hopefully that person is listening to this podcast and is like, you know what, you're right. I do want to go and just start building some reasonably priced and sized homes and
Yeah.
creating some opportunities.
It is interesting. So, again, now being an empty nester, um, retired guy, I don't need a 4-bedroom house to myself. Looking at possibly, you know, what's my next move? What's my next step? And I will tell you that I've looked at new construction, and it's crazy because new construction, you look at any new construction within 40 miles of me, and they're all, 3,200 square feet and 5 bedrooms and I mean
Right.
they're just these giant homes for family of five or whatever, right? And so I think, yeah, it is hard to find smaller homes. Again, whether it's a starter home or even just a smaller footprint. I did come across a smaller it was a smaller home, about 1,700 square feet, no basement, right? So it was built on slab on grade is
Mhm.
what they call it. And it was basically a detached townhome. Okay. So I'm like, oh, interesting. And I'm looking at the development. It's not too far away from where I live now, but literally this standalone townhome was like $420,000.
What?
Not include, then you had like another, $600 HOA on top of it. Like, are you kidding me? Like, what? Anyway, it's crazy.
Tell me that was 100 yards off the interstate or something.
Yeah, it was.
So it
Yeah,
was
it's crazy.
okay.
I'll send you the link. It's
I'd love to
crazy.
see it. I'd love to see it. But yeah, I I think too, you started mentioning this early on in this recording. Um, I do remember listening to an interview not too long ago where there's there's not enough supply, but some of that is also because of the restrictions on what is allowed to be built in a lot of
Right.
areas. There's a lot of communities where they were saying um, they only want to allow single family housing of a certain size, both size house and size lot. So you look at some places where a lot of times think about starter homes could even be places like a duplex or a triplex or something like that. And a lot of these communities will not let new, and so
Right.
I'm not even talking like apartment complex. I'm just talking about duplex, triplex, quadplex be built in those areas. So you have a plot of land that could actually put 8 homes on it, but because of the regulations around it, it's
Yeah.
the classic NIMBYism, basically,
Yeah.
right? Not my backyard. So these communities that just want these larger single family homes.
Yep.
And unfortunately, it's just decreasing the demand,
And
or
I
not
looked
the
at that.
demand, the supply.
Yeah, totally. And actually, so north of where I am, so north of the Twin Cities in Minnesota here, I looked at a pretty large, it was like I think it was 60 acres, looking at how that could be split. And again, it was you were restricted. Like
Mhm.
I couldn't split it into multiple parcels. I couldn't provide separate property ID numbers by the county to even start having your own development. And so you were kind of stuck. And yeah, I understand it can be frustrating for, again, those starter homes, those first time home buyers. Um, so I think, let's, some words of wisdom, some last minute thoughts. Um, don't be fooled by some of those headlines. It's not all like, oh my gosh, I'll never be able to find a place to live because they're all $1 million. they're not all $1 million. Only
Right.
in some of those markets there may be. And
Some of those markets, you
in all
know,
seriousness, Dan, those aren't starter homes. I wouldn't count them starter homes. They're the lower third of home values, which again, most likely they're
could
they're
mean
not.
anything. Could mean
Yeah, they're
anything,
not starter
right?
homes.
I think a big thing too is also just to say where you are today isn't where you're going to be 5 years from now. So, you know, accept where you are today. And if it means today you're not buying a home, it's okay. Just stay focused, control the things that you can control, and just keep working and seeking out those contacts and making sure your skill set's good. Don't forget to live a little bit in the meantime. It's
Yeah.
not all about work, work, work. You know, develop a good whatever a good social network means for you, whether it's one friend, 10 friends, 1,000 friends if you're a real extroverted go-getter. But develop those relationships and just focus on what you can control, work hard, and things will turn out. They really will, but it's the kind of thing where you can't really see it and accept it until you've kind of gone through it. Like, oh, guarantee you, someone who's hearing this right now thinks I'm full of it, and 5 years from now, they're going to say, "Oh yeah, he's actually right." But you just seeing is believing, and they'll
Yeah.
see it eventually.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, thanks again, Dan. Thank you everyone for listening. Really do appreciate it. Again, we really do encourage you. Please like, subscribe, click the bell on YouTube, leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts. If you get it there, leave a review. We'd absolutely love to hear from you. And what would really help us the most is just share it with a friend. Share it with a friend, family member, someone you work with, anybody, your mom, your dad, your
Sisters, brothers, friends, cousins,
that's right.
whomever. I think
Share it with
also if you're listening to this and you have some questions that pop up,
yeah.
shoot us an email. We'd love to talk about it a little bit. And because we we're happy to sit there and talk with articles and things that we see, but if we can help provide some general way of viewing some certain tasks or whatever that you're focusing on in your life, then we'd happy to do that too. So
Awesome. Good point, Dan. Again, you can get all of our contact information in the show notes. And we look forward to seeing you next time on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. See ya.